first time, but then if you get caught subsequently, then they're going to throw the book at you. So, Mr. Leith.
Yo, I am good to go.
Okay. And can you hit that fan even if you get hot, just because it literally does sound like a small jet.
Okay, it should be nothing now because I have a big fan and a little fan that I run at the same time.
Then I don't think it's the fans, because we can still hear like a back thing. You want to move your mic that's on your headset down to your mouth and see if that's the one you're talking from? Other side.
Okay.
Talk.
Hello.
No, it's the same volume.
Yeah, shouldn't be anything else. And on my side, I'm looking at my audio. I don't see anything but me talking.
Chat, let me ask you this. Are you guys getting... Oh, can you fuck with your mic sensitivity in Discord? Basically, if you go to Discord,
well, I'm
settings...
not in Discord, we're just in the StreamYard.
Oh, right? True. What do you use any kind of software to enhance or fuck with your mic shit?
Absolutely not.
You don't use like OBS or something?
I am using OBS right now, but I don't use it for my audio.
Let's try Discord real quick. Okay. And see if we have the same issue. So I'm actually going to remove you from this call, and then I'm going to call you on Discord.
All right. Not a problem.
Fix it.
All right.
Hello?
Hello.
Yeah, better? So it is better in a way. I can still hear the fan, weirdly enough, when your mic picks up, which is fine. We can definitely roll with that.
Cars, but
it's fine. It's good. It's good enough where we can only hear it when oh crap, add to stage. We can only hear it when you're talking. So the good news is we won't have that like constant white noise. But yeah, we are good. Leith, sorry. So I'm not mispronouncing you for the next fucking hour. How do you pronounce? I pronounce it Leith Waterkai. How do you pronounce it?
You could be Leithy. You just say Kai. Either way works.
Okay, so I'll roll with Leithy or Kai. So you sent me a message within the past week, effectively saying like, "Hey, it's interesting that you were talking about how like religion or whatever maybe could have prevented some of the shenanigans that happened with Destiny. I'm curious about this. Let's talk about it." I said, "Fuck yeah, I absolutely want an opportunity to talk about this." So we're here. So do you want to kick us off, introduce yourself to the people at home, and then just kind of maybe hit us with your religious or spiritual background so we have some context for where you're coming from?
Well, I am Leithy Waterkai. Some people in your chat may know, and some may be coming to know me. I heard your conversation, I think it was with Brianna Wu, and you said the trigger words, cultural Christianity, and I was like, yeah, I need to talk to this dude about this because this has become a hot button topic from people like Jordan Peterson, what's his name? Richard Dawkins has been talking about cultural Christianity.
Sure.
This woman, Ayan, who's also been talking about it, and it is horrendous. So
why? All right. What is your hostility to religion, but maybe Christianity in particular? And I'll be happy to lay out my worldview momentarily, but I obviously want to dig in a little bit.
I think it's fairly similar to the issue that people have with conservatism in itself. It's like, are you a true believer or are you a grifter? So in the case that you happen to be a Christian, I can understand you having the beliefs, you being anti-LGBT, so on and so forth. But being culturally Christian, you're literally just faking the funk and you're kind of grifting to try to get some of the good things that come from Christianity while ignoring the horrendous shit that you don't believe in. And well, I'm an atheist, and I was a Christian for probably 30 years of my life.
Yeah, so hopefully I can convert you. So you're saying you're an atheist now. How did you feel about the divinity of Christ when you were a Christian versus now?
I believed in it at the time, and once I finally was no longer convinced, then everything started to unravel.
Okay. How do you feel about telling the truth?
I believe telling the truth is paramount.
Okay. How do you feel about loving your parents as best you can, even if they're flawed people?
Absolutely.
How do you feel about murder?
Murder is horrible.
Okay. How do you feel about? I'm obviously going off the Ten Commandments from
Yeah.
memory, right? But how do you feel about? Uh, I'm being a dick, but we're kind of making the point, right? How do you feel about like lusting after your neighbor's wife, right? Like your friend or your neighbor, their wife is smoking fucking hot, so you're staring at them. You're kind of like being a creep to them, whatever. Whenever like their husband is not in the room, you're hitting on them a little bit, like all that kind of stuff. How do you feel like that as a general
I
behavior?
think that's slimy garbage.
Okay, so here's the thing. So we have the Ten Commandments, which was probably written 3,200 years ago. I've asked you about four of them, and you're like, actually, these are all things I believe, right?
Mhm.
And then we talked about the divinity. How do you feel about sacrificing your well being for the sake of other people?
I have no problem doing that.
Do you think it's noble in a way to put others before yourself?
I mean, it can be, but I don't think it's something that should be pressed on people.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. So I don't want to like keep going through like 10,000 different arguments of like moral behavior, but would you, and then I'm being a smartass again, so I'll just keep being a smartass.
No,
So
please.
would you rather listen to me talk for 15 minutes about how being brave when the world is against you is good versus watching a Marvel movie? Which would be a more enjoyable experience?
Watching a Marvel movie. And that's kind of
Boom.
where I
So
was
here,
at with it beforehand. So, like, I was going to get
yeah,
there as well. I think we can
yeah.
get our morals or whatever you want to call it from things like Marvel movies, comic books, so on and so forth. With great power comes great responsibility. You don't need a god, you don't need any of these other things to tell you or inform that position. We can get that from this.
Ooh, okay. So let me ask you another thing. What do you think? I'm jumping all over the place, and I promise I'll make this like a coherent argument momentarily. But the reason why I'm jumping all over the place is because I want to demonstrate kind of the idea behind cultural Christianity. We mentioned that leering and being lustful towards your friend or neighbor's wife is bad. We mentioned that lying is bad. We mentioned that murder is bad. We mentioned that you should take care of your parents even if they're flawed people, right?
Mhm.
Those are things that we said that you and I both believe. Okay. What do you think happens to people who disregard those general moral guidances?
There's a pretty good chance they come into some conflict in their life. There's a chance that they don't, but they're good guidelines
Right.
to keep you on the rails to not have those problems come up in your life.
There's a higher than average chance that if you ignore those rules, you're going to suffer. That would
Absolutely.
be my argument. Okay. So my argument to you is that the Old Testament, the New Testament, and Islam. If Phil Koe is here, he's going to fucking hate this. Biblical stories were effectively the way that we conveyed morality for the past 3 or 4 thousand years. And not just that, there are spiritual and religious concepts that are in a variety of religions, but they are in, I think Christianity actually does have a lot of things right. And so if I was to sit down and I was like a pure anti theist, I could eliminate the stories and the history and the mythology and just get the moral code. But the truth is that I'm going to lose 90% of people because just reading a moral code repeatedly that's been boiled down without any kind of context or story is going to be boring as fuck. Whereas if you have moral codes imbued in partially historical, partially mythological stories, then you're going to be paying attention a fuckload more. So that's what I'm talking about with cultural Christianity. So what do you have a beef with any of those ideas?
Again, like that's where my issue comes down. Like we're taking the parts that we like, which if that's the case, let's just create something different aside from and without the baggage of Christianity. Because when I see people saying they want to
Why?
be culturally Christian, it tends to be because they want to shit on Islam, they want to shit on some other moral code they don't like. Whereas we have
Mm-hmm.
something called secular humanism, which seems to work pretty great. And it seems to work also toward harm reduction. And it skips that very first commandment that nobody gives a shit about.
Which one?
thou shalt have no other gods before me.
Sure. Well, so let's
And then you're also with the
let's
Sabbath day, like who I don't even think Christians follow the Sabbath day. So there's still some fat in there we can trim off. So we can just go ahead and move into a whole nother framework altogether.
yeah. So I don't like throwing out the baby with the bathwater, okay?
Mhm.
And the reason why is because I think that human beings are looking for roots, existential, spiritual, historical roots. And so I don't think there's any problem with effectively saying that the Bible is, at least this is me, okay? I'm not going to cater the way that I'm talking to the religious people in my audience, and I'm not going to cater the way I'm talking to the atheist people in my audience. I swear to God, like I try. One of my sins over the past 3 or 4 years is I feel like if I want to express an idea, but I think that idea might be upsetting, I always try to like play with the words as it's coming out, and I think that's part of my problem. I keep attracting people who get fucking offended every time I phrase things a little bit aggressively, whereas I just want you to take what I have to fucking say, right? Anyways, so with the baby with the bathwater, I don't think that there is a single fucking problem with summarizing spiritual and religious knowledge within historical context of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And I don't think that I don't think it's a problem to say that these have contradictory moral lessons that are appropriate in different contexts. So, for instance, what is it? Jesus Christ, right before he's about to be put to death, he has two contradictory, I would say, sayings, which is one, he says, you who don't have your sword, sell your cloak and buy one. And he's effectively saying, like, if you don't have the means with which to defend yourself, then you need the capacity to defend yourself. So go ahead and get it. And then later on, one of his servants or slaves or whatever chops the ear off of one of the Roman guards who's taking Jesus away. And Jesus heals that man, allegedly, and says, don't strike your enemies or whatever. He who lives by the sword dies from it, right? And so the way that I was taught as a child is that these were contradictory messages where Jesus did one so he could do the other. Now, as an adult, when I look at different parables from Jesus, there's one where he talks about, like, I didn't come to bring peace. I came to bring the sword or whatever. Or he talks about the parable of the Mises, where God is going to come back at some day and he's not going to be like the lamb. He's going to be the lion. He's going to be the wrathful judge. I'm like, oh shit. Like, there's way more like militant texts in Christianity than I was told. I was effectively told that it was a pacifist religion as a child. But for me, it's like studying those things. It's like self-defense is one thing, deferring to the state is another, loving your enemies is another, and then still believing in righteous and wrathful judgment is another. These are all contextually different, and it's worthy of analysis. And you're not necessarily going to get that kind of moral analysis or spiritual analysis from a kid's cartoon.
I don't see why not. I mean, I think these ideas existed long before the Bible did. We just decided we wanted to attach it to Christianity because it's something we as Americans or like even Europeans are familiar with. I think stepping away from that and losing that baggage would be a benefit to us because there's a certain level of onus and judgment that comes along with what we perceive Christianity to be. And I don't think it's fair.
Let's talk about the negative externalities. What are some of the negative externalities that you think come along with Christianity that might leak into cultural Christianity?
So a lot of people that have a problem with LGBTQ people tend to have that feeling, not because they themselves have rationalized it within themselves, but because they believe it is against nature or against God. And some people equate God with nature pretty often, even though they don't even know it themselves because they haven't had that discussion with themselves.
True. I was actually going to appeal to a natural God in this conversation. It's funny.
So
no,
with
that
being the case,
you're right.
We can kind of get around that and have people actually face, like, be honest and say you just don't like gay people. That's fine for you to not like gay people, but don't try to use a moral framework to try to justify it.
Okay. I don't think cultural Christians would articulate their distaste for homosexuality or lesbianism or transgenderism as an affront to God, because as far as I can tell, cultural Christianity is largely an agnostic movement. It's We want the morals of Christianity. We want these good lessons of, love thy neighbor as thyself, don't lie, don't murder, don't cheat, don't steal, don't bang your neighbor's wife, et cetera, et cetera. We want all of those moral lessons, but we don't necessarily believe it literally. And on top of that, so you mentioned Richard Dawkins and I think Ayaan Hirsi Ali,
Yes.
and you mentioned Jordan Peterson.
Mhm.
So what I would say is that Richard Dawkins and Ayaan Hirsi Ali, they probably saw the conflict spawned by anti-theism, and they probably saw the dogmatic, aggressive, vicious behavior that supposed rational atheists were capable of. And they kind of realized it's like, oh, it's not necessarily the ideology. This is actually nestled within human behavior. And so as a result, you don't go from being a Christian to being an atheist and then all of a sudden you're a good fucking person, right? You don't go from being a Christian to being a secular humanist and then all of a sudden you're like perfectly applying like all of the ideological tenets of secular humanism, right? It takes like study and intention and analysis and like all that kind of stuff. And so what they're saying is like a lot of the moral presuppositions, like you shouldn't fuck your neighbor's wife, is nestled in Christianity. And so society, generally speaking, holds it that fucking your neighbor's wife is a bad thing, but that is presupposed. There are other moral systems that could argue that fucking your neighbor's wife is actually a good thing. As a matter of fact, there are pagan religions that would argue that might makes right. They would argue that rape is okay. They would argue that killing or murder is okay, particularly if that person is in an out group. And so what they're saying, they're not saying, I literally believe Christianity. They're saying that there's a lot of positive moral presuppositions that we don't want to throw out that's rooted in this story. That's what I hear anyways.
That's if we ignore all the, hey, let's commit a genocide. Hey, slavery seems to be okay. Here's how you should do it. Like I'm saying, there's baggage there.
But let's write this down, okay?
Mhm.
Sorry, you said slavery and hatred of gays.
Yeah.
Do you have like another one? Do you have another one off the top of your head?
Genocide, or the ability to wipe out your enemies without really giving a shit and make sure you kill all of them.
Slavery, genocide, slavery, genocide,
anti-LGBTQ, anti-women,
gay,
because the Bible really shits on women.
Listen, we're gonna keep that one, okay? So, anyways, all right, let's talk about slavery real quick. So the vast majority of justifications for slavery are going to come from the Old Testament, and it's effectively going to be around like Jewish law surrounding like the way that people should treat their slaves and treat each other. Okay. Now, a religious person would effectively say like, well, God was communicating to the Jewish people within the context of their time. And we've, of course, morally evolved in the past 2,000 to 3,000 years. Therefore, these laws no longer apply. Now, Christians 200 years ago in the fucking 1800s or whatever, they used the fact that Old Testament slavery existed in order to say, no, we can keep our slaves. This is Christian. It's in the Old Testament. If God didn't want us to own black people, then why would he create Old Testament laws about it? And so I think religious literalism would potentially condone, Christian religious literalism would potentially condone slavery. However, I think cultural Christianity would be like, no, that's a historical relic from 2,500 years ago. We obviously know that owning another person or compelling them into service is bad. Therefore, this is one of the things that we're going to say, this is a historical analysis of the morality of 500 to 700 years before Christ. But this morality has no application today.
I would like to say
that's what a cultural Christian would say.
Yeah, if you don't believe that this is coming from a God, then yeah, you can probably just say, hey, this is bad stuff. But then you get the same thing from secular humanism, where you're looking at harm reduction, and I'm going to say owning another person or compelling them into service is definitely something harmful, and you don't want to do that. The problem comes down with it's more than just in the Old Testament. It's also in the New Testament, coming from Paul saying to slaves, obey your masters, so on and so forth. If this was coming from, go ahead.
Oh, all I was going to say is we could actually tie Paul to the anti-LGBTQ stuff as well. But no, I want you to finish your
Oh,
idea
Paul
because
is
I
ridiculous.
can move it. Yeah.
Yeah, Paul and Catholicism in general, like, definitely have some baggage that they also carry along with them. But again, this is the baggage that comes from Christianity in itself. And if you can use this moral standard to justify a wrong, which I can't do with secular humanism, then there's
Mhm.
already something inherently wrong with its core.
Well, yeah, then let's compare secular humanism as a moral system in a moment. I kind of want to address the things that we're saying though. So you said like, okay, well they're throwing the baby out, or they're throwing the bathwater and the baby out. It would be better to just like make a new baby, I guess. And so you're not dealing with this like horrible shit water that the baby has been swimming in for 3,000 years. Okay, that's kind of what I'm hearing.
Well, it's that
The
the baby didn't start here. The baby existed before this thing did, and we actually are ignoring all the things we had before, like just our own evolution as a species, as we're a societal species. We came up with rules to be able to get along as a society. We already had these in place. They existed in Zoroastrianism and other religions, or just in general within societies. Like killing people definitely was never on our list of things we really like doing. So go ahead.
I think there's arguments here, but anyways, but I want to hit your genocide, anti-gay, anti-woman shit because that's the things that we brought up as like the potential toxic backwater or bathwater. Okay, so with genocide, I would say that that would be the same thing as slavery, where it'd be like, okay, correct me if I'm wrong. We're talking about the Jews moving into the realm of Canaan and then conquering it, and there being a city that was so evil that not only did they kill, and by the way, this was after the 10 Commandments. So obviously, the 10 Commandments means thou shalt not murder, not thou shalt not kill, because literally the Jews like killed the fuck out of the Canaanites almost immediately after the 10 Commandments, right? So it is thou shalt not murder. You might know thou shalt not kill, but it's thou shalt not murder, okay? So when it came to the Canaanite tribes that they conquered or whatever, there was 2 or 3 cities that they like sacked, enslaved the women, killed all the military aged men, like all that kind of stuff. And then there was like one city that was so evil that God was like, you're not just going to kill the men, women, and children. You are also going to kill the livestock. These people are so fucking evil that they are a blight on the planet and they must be erased from history. That was a commandment from God. Now, my suspicion is that that came from like a Jewish tribal chieftain who hated these particular people a lot. But what I would say is, argumentatively, I would put this in the same category as slavery, where you just say, this is a relic of its time, right? That we don't believe that God would condone the wholesale slaughter of men, women, children, and animals because they're so uniquely evil, right?
Absolutely. And I think
Okay.
the fact that this is said to be coming from a God telling you that you need to wipe these people out and you're going to be punished if you happen to leave some livestock for yourself and leave some women for yourself, you are committing a crime against God is just kind of goofy in itself.
I agree. So, anti-gay and anti-woman, I would say that this is a relic of Paul, largely. He was the gentleman who established the church effectively, and what he was doing as a Roman citizen, he used to hunt Christians. Then he had a divine revelation that he should be a Christian. Then he was such a forcible, charismatic, and intelligent person that he wrote a series of letters to all of the early churches that existed within the Roman Empire, telling them how to conduct their affairs. A lot of people use him as a justification for anti homosexual vibes, I guess. And then also they use him as justification for a lot of anti-female rhetoric as well, because you were talking about how like a slave should obey their master and a master should take care of their slave. I think almost immediately within like either a few verses or a different letter immediately after that, he talks about like marriage, like, men and women are one entity and therefore wives have to be obedient to their husbands and their husbands have to treat their wives like the church and all that kind of stuff. And so obviously the best interpretation of that is that like a man should be just in his dealings with his wife, but a lot of men have used that as like, no, if I say something, that's what it is, and if you disobey that, you're not just disobeying me, you're disobeying God, right?
Oh, it even goes further to be like, just straight up, women do not teach in church at all. You stay quiet when you're in church.
Agreed. Based. So that's one of the things that I would carry forward. But anyways, my wife would hate We go to a church with a female priest, and my Catholic friend fucking
Paul
hates
would
me for it.
disapprove.
And
Yes.
yeah, he would. But the way that a cultural Christian or a Unitarian or even some Protestants would argue, and I think that this is a decent argument, is that the Christ, so God is God, right? So God delivers his message to the people. God is also logos, so he is truth, right? He is like emanated, he pre-exists existence, but he is revealed in reality through reality itself, right? And so because of that, God is God. Leave that there. With Jesus is the human incarnation of God. It is God's will manifest in flesh, here to tell people, effectively what God's will is and how he wants humans to conduct themselves. That's the way, like, I would say a literalist Christian believes these concepts, right? With Protestants and with cultural Christians, I think they would view Paul as not God. He's not Jesus. And he's not truth revealed in form, right? He's a human being. He's a human being who's interpreting what he thinks is appropriate based off of his time and place. And so you said, like, your beef with cultural Christianity is that you could ignore the shit that you don't like. Well, I would say that that's like a perfectly valid argument, not just for cultural Christians, but also for Protestants, to take the good parts of Paul and ignore all the bad parts, because he's not God himself. He's a man.
Yeah, and that's why I really like that you started with the Ten Commandments. And for some reason, they weren't able to slip into the Ten Commandments. Hey, let's not own people. Should have been right there somewhere, and Jesus never got to that one either. Never said, hey, don't own people. But they can bring up all sorts of other things, like don't have graven images.
Well, but here's the thing. Like, I am not so... I'm trying to think of how... I don't have so much hubris that I think that I am different than the human beings who existed 2,000 or 3,000 years ago. We are not like more intelligent than people 2,000 or 3,000 years ago. We're operating with different information. The reason why you and I, like, we haven't significantly genetically evolved in the past 3,000 years. We've socioculturally evolved, right? And so what I would say is the reason why slavery probably was never brought up in the Old or New Testament was because it was a expression of the material requirements of reality at the time. And so, as an example, sugarcane production in the 17th and 18th centuries, right? With sugarcane, that is an effort-intensive product that the entire world wants, but no sane human being would ever want to be a sugar cane field hand. Like, there is like no amount of money that you could pay people and have a profitable product and get people to fucking harvest sugar cane, right? And so as a result, I view slavery as like a product of its material time, where it's like, well, we don't have machines, we don't have metal, we don't have industrial machinery, we just have black people who we can point a gun at and say, start picking up sugarcane until you fucking die, right? Like that's basically what we have at the time. So I would view like moral evolution as a jump back and forth between morality and technology, like over and over and over again. And that's why slavery wasn't addressed in the Bible.
That's ridiculous, because if it's supposed to be coming from God, and the fact that, so that's where the whole cultural Christianity versus Christianity itself becomes like kind of a non-starter. If you actually are a true believer, I'm not going to trip on the fact that you may hold some of these ideas because you actually think it comes from a divine source. In the case of a cultural Christian, you don't believe it came from a divine source. You believe it came from man and the culture that those people came from. And literally these people were like goat herders and shit, living in the desert, living by whatever means they needed to. We can evolve beyond that.
But I don't dismiss the wisdom of goat herders. So as an example, and we can get into secular humanism as like a comparative tool for like a moral understanding. But I would say I don't dismiss the wisdom of goat herders the same way that I don't dismiss the wisdom of almost anybody. Okay. And so just as an example, like we have I'm just going to say, in the modern context, we have the association of shepherds, in my opinion, of being pussies. And the reason why is because sheep are nice, right? Like sheep are nice, they bleat. You oftentimes don't have to slaughter them, you just have to shear them in order to get a product. We have good fences and decent agriculture now. We have a lot of modern tools and all that kind of stuff. So we associate being a shepherd with being a pussy, basically. But if you actually analyze the history of the time, being a shepherd wasn't being a pussy. If anything, it was being like a guardian, right? And so going and tending to livestock animals, and we're not talking about like green mountainsides in Europe. We're talking about like deserty scrub shit grass in the Mediterranean, right? And this is an area that's populated with like eagles and lions, and I'm sure they have some version of like coyotes or wild dogs or whatever, right? And so what you're talking about is and this was like a kid's job, right? So from the age of 8 to the age of like 20, you are given rocks and a leather strap that you can fling at somebody's fucking head at like 80 miles an hour, and you can kill people with this thing. It's basically like a fucking gun, right? And you are told to go care for these animals. And so there are all sorts of lessons about like stewardship, guardianship, responsibility, what you do. Like they talk about like the lost sheep parable, which is actually counterintuitive to like shepherding good practice, I guess. And so you're able to like couch all of these like interesting moral stories into this ancient concept that is actually pretty fucking cool. And so as a result, if you sit down and you're like, here's the secular humanist bullet points of what it takes to be a good steward and shepherd and leader, I'm going to look at your PowerPoint and I'm going to be like, okay, this is fucking boring and gay. I'm not going to pay attention to this. Whereas if you tell me about how a shepherd, led a nation and, threw a rock into some like 11-foot dude's skull in order to like save the kingdom of Israel, I might actually like absorb some of the moral messaging from this story. And so that kind of gets back to, do we absorb moral messaging from bullet points, or do we absorb moral messaging from stories?
I think stories work great, and that's why I was saying we can treat the Bible as a comic book, but to actually try to hold those ideas leads us into like hating Muslims, like what Dawkins and Ayan seem to do, or hating gay
Sometimes
people.
Muslims are dicks.
Sometimes Christians are dicks.
I agree.
So,
but sometimes hatred is justified. Even the Quran would say that.
Yeah, it's that you're allowed to blanketly dislike one entire ideology, not put it on the people themselves because this particular Muslim is a dick. Because I believe, like, by all means, if there's a group of Muslims that are dicks, hate on them. Do what you got to do. But don't do it because they're Muslim. Do it because they're dicks.
Sure. And I agree with you to that extent. But okay. So I think we're going to hit something where argumentatively we're going to get to the same place pretty quickly, which is basically like, I would say that Christians who use the pretext of religion as their justification for why they hate a group of people probably like insufficiently studied their own fucking shit, right? Like they don't understand their own shit. Are you looking at porn or something, or is chat being really fucking funny? Like,
I got Gibbs in my chat right now and it's fucking killing me.
Oh, all right. Gibbs, eat a dick and die. Like, go have a fucking heart attack off of a fucking cheeseburger, okay? I don't give two flying fucks about you. As a matter of fact, since you're here anyways, and you're distracting from the conversation, Gibbs, you're a fucking liar, okay? You said that, I sent people from my community to harass you? You mean that out of the 90 people that are in my fucking chat cross-platform, there's somebody who gives a fuck about you in Texas enough to go research who you are and call your business to harass you? That's a lie. That didn't happen. Not only did I never encourage that or say that, not only did my wife never say that or encourage that, you made up that happened because none of the 90 people on my side care about you enough to harass you in real life. So if you're lying about that, I'm curious about what else you're lying about. Are you lying about your accomplishments? Are you lying about how much money you have? Are you lying about where you live? Are you lying about how nice your house is? Are you lying about how many girls you hang out with? That's my curiosity. So I don't care enough about you in order to research those things. I'm just going to kind of dismiss you as a piece of shit and move on with my life. And actually, I recommend you do the same. I recommend you block me on Twitter. That way you don't have to see my posts. I recommend you block me on Twitch and YouTube. That way we don't have to interact with each other again. And I suggest you move on with your life. That's my recommendation to you, Mr. Gibbs. Anyways, back to the conversation.
Wonderful aside.
Yeah, let's get back to the conversation. So when it comes to secular humanism, I think that this is my beef with secular humanism, and maybe you can get me past it, okay? So religion does have the appeal of history, of story, of God, of trying to figure out the universe, et cetera, et cetera. And these are pretty deep things that are difficult to like yank out by the roots, right? Whereas I think with secular humanism, because it's a relatively like modern philosophy, and there is no higher authority, the only higher authority is human rationality. Well, I think human beings are pretty good at rationalizing themselves into terrible behavior. So as an example, the reason why I like a Christian or a cultural Christian wouldn't fuck somebody else's wife is because the Christian dogmatic would say, God doesn't want me to fuck other people's wives, right? A cultural Christian would say, there's probably a reason why 2,000 years ago, or 3,000 years ago, they came up with the rule not to fuck other people's wives. And it probably has something to do with like social harmony. And so as a result, I shouldn't fuck somebody else's wife because it'll have negative consequences for us. That's rooted in this historical perspective on sex and relationships. A secular humanist could say, and by the way, this is Destiny, this is Vosh, this is Hassan probably, this is a whole bunch of people who are not religious. They would say, well, if the husband and wife consent, and if you wear a condom, then there's no consequences to you fucking your neighbor's wife. Go ahead. So what does secular humanism have against fucking somebody else's wife as long as the wife consents and everybody wears a condom?
It would be the harm that you're causing by
What harm?
sleeping with your neighbor's wife. You're going to create disharmony within that household. Someone may get hurt. Someone may get killed. Like things happen when people cheat on their spouses. Now, if everybody's consenting,
what if it's not cheating though?
Oh, if everybody's consenting, I mean, what are you going to do? If they're in an open relationship, there should be no harm at that point. So like these things are fluid and can be applied.
So but cultural Christian, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So with that being the case, like if you, like we say things like don't shit where you eat because it's going to cause disharmony within your job. If something happens in that relationship or whatever the case may be, it's being basically don't sleep with people you work with. Sure. Which is also something apropos to the conversation. It creates a disharmony, which is a harm.
Sure. But I think that with cultural Christians, the reason they would put, number one, they would put more weight in commandments, even if they have a secular view on the revelation of the commandments themselves, but they would put more weight on it and therefore they would be less likely to violate it. And then number two, because religion, I would say secular humanism is probably like a fairly human centered endeavor, which probably does. I would say that if I start reading it, it's going to boil everything down to the individual. What harms an individual? What harms you? What harms another individual within your circuit or whatever? Whereas I think that religion oftentimes is very collective in the way that it thinks. And so as a result of that collectivism, it'll talk about harm to the whole. So in my opinion, a secular humanist would be more likely, not all the time, but they would be more likely to say, if I wear a condom and the wife consents and the husband consents, I can fuck my neighbor's wife. Whereas a cultural Christian will say, well, 3,000 years ago, they kind of observed that this was fucking over everything in society. As a result, even though technically I can only see minimal consequences if everybody consents, this is still bad and I shouldn't do it. And I won't as a result. That's actually the difference right there, in my opinion. I think that you can rationalize almost anything.
I think in this case, the cultural Christian and the secular humanist would come to a pretty similar idea that, hey, this situation could cause harm. Like, hey, if I sleep with my neighbors, there may be some consequences down the road, much like don't shit where you eat. Whereas at the same time, the cultural Christian has a moral impetus on them that was already set up by the framework of some supposed deity a long time ago. This is the same reason
Mhm.
why you have the issues with the Catholic Church playing Move the Priest, and why you have Christian pastors impregnating people in their congregation, even, people that are underage. The the Christianity itself is not going to be something that stops a predator or a addict. And that's kind of where I was
I
trying to get to it toward the end of it is, if someone is an addict, no matter what their moral compass is, they will find rationalities or ways to rationalize their addiction and how they feed it.
Yeah, so I disagree. The reason why I disagree is because I think we're effectively swimming in a cultural soup. And so as a result of swimming in a cultural soup, we are more likely to engage in different behaviors. And so what I mean by that is, like, you can point to 3,000 years, well, I guess it's 2,000 years, right? You can point to 2,000 years of malfeasance by the church. And by the way, the prohibition against priests having wives or whatever, it actually comes from bad behavior by clergy members during the thousands. Like, I think it literally came from a bunch of priests were getting a bunch of fucking nuns pregnant, and a bunch of priests were using their authority in order to impregnate local fucking members of their flock. And so as a result, they were like, bam, you can't have sex anymore, you fucking retards, you couldn't handle it. Right. So that doesn't come from Christ. That doesn't come from God. That comes from the church, a man-made institution. Right. And so as an example of, like, why I don't hold the church in high regard as I would spiritual revelation. One of the great quotes from, like, I think that it was like the 1500s or 1600s, was somebody criticizing the Pope, and they basically said that Pope has spent more time in armor fighting war than he has in his robes ministering to the church. And so he was effectively like now, of course, like, that was a time of war, but at the same time, he was a secular leader preoccupying himself with material wealth and power within Italy. He wasn't a spiritual guide who was leading Christendom into closer proximity to God, right? And so that's where I think that humans are flawed and fail all the time. And so I don't put as much weight in their material concerns as I do, like, maybe spiritual revelation, I guess. But I think that if you look at biblical prohibitions, there's always going to be a root, right? And so for me, when it comes to let's talk about pork and then homophobia. When it comes to pork, I almost guarantee you and shellfish. Pork. Pigs don't sweat, I think, is a thing. We'd have to Google it. And so they maintain, like, a lot of their toxins, like, inside their body or whatever. And so you have to cook pork properly, or it can fucking hurt you or kill you, right? Like, bacterial exposure or exposure to toxins. So what I think is, pork was probably like a really cheap meat back in the day because everybody preferred everything else besides pork because it wasn't getting cooked properly, right? But Jews saw people get sick or get killed by improperly cooked pork, and they were like, God doesn't want us to eat pork, right? Then same thing with shellfish. So with shellfish, a lot of people are allergic to shellfish, right? And so what happened was somebody probably had an allergic reaction to shellfish. And so as a result, they died. They had an allergic reaction or they died. So Jews said, no more shellfish, right? God says no more shellfish. And then I forget the last one. What was it? It was pork, shellfish, and then there was another one.
Mixed fabrics.
Mixed fabrics is like it's like a religious thing for being in temple. It actually, I don't think that's a broad prescription for society.
I mean,
Um,
all of these are wonderful and they make sense, but they couldn't slide slavery in there. So this is a problem. Secular humanism is fluid and you can add
you want
things as you move
sugar,
along.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, you live 1,000 years ago. The only way that you're going to get sugar is if you have slaves.
I don't think that's the only way you're going to get sugar. You may have a lot less sugar, but
Yeah,
having
you're going to have a
slaves,
fuckload less sugar to the point that it might as well not exist.
I mean, that's perfectly fine. We don't necessarily need it. We just
You're
like
saying
it.
that. You say that because you have as much fucking sugar as you want. Motherfucker 1,000 years ago was like, I will kill for sugar.
I mean, people would
So,
kill for
and by the
purple
way, I'm not,
dye at one point.
yeah, people, exactly. You're with me. Slavery was, in my opinion, prior to like the thousands, slavery was probably as natural as any other social institution on the fucking planet. Like the fact that there were going to be warring kingdoms of different languages and religious beliefs, and that some of those people were going to be conquered and then forced to do labor against their will, that was probably as natural as the DMV is to us.
Yeah, but why moralize it? Like, that's the ridiculous portion of it. And they
Why
moralize
moralize it?
it for one group versus another group, where one group actually gets out of slavery and is freed of
Well,
all. Yeah,
I think you know why, right? So for instance, like the let's talk about like the beating of slaves, right? So I somebody can correct me on the specifics. I haven't read it recently, right? But effectively, if you beat a Jew to death, you are put to death, right? If you beat a slave to death and they die immediately, I think you also get put to death. But if you beat a slave and then he hangs on for a few days and then he dies, then you won't be put to death, right? Now, obviously, that didn't come from God. God didn't say, this is the amount of beatings that you could administer to your slaves. What happened was within Jewish society at the time, where it was normal to have a slave, somebody beat the dog shit out of their slave and killed them, which was unjust. They killed a slave who had fucked something, they fucked up the sugar pie. They fucked up their Egyptian bread and they beat that slave to death. That was fucked up. Nobody wants that, right? So they prohibit that. And they basically say, if you beat your slave to death, you're going to kill him. Or excuse me, you're going to die, right? But then there was somebody popular or powerful within the Jewish community, and he beat his slave, but his slave lived a few days, and people were like, hold on, he died after the fourth day, though, and you said if you beat a slave to death, then we need to kill him. And they're like, yeah, but that's like Frank, and Frank's a good guy, and like he pays his bills, and he's like really nice in the synagogue and stuff. So we're going to go ahead and make it God's law that if you beat your slave and then he dies a few days later, then it is what it is, right? So obviously that's a kind of like human dilution that happens within like a human-made institution. But I would argue that secular humanism is just as likely to be diluted and used for nefarious ends as Christianity is.
absolutely. But again, that's why I'm saying it's fluid. Like, we don't say that God said this. We're not looking to a God to fix it. We're looking to society to understand what its needs are and to make that fit secular humanism, which is why we got the Manifesto 1 and then we have Manifesto 2, which is better. It's going to be something we can change. Whereas
What's
you
the
can't change
Manifesto
the Bible.
2?
So Manifesto 2 is written in 1973, and it was an intended update to replace the previous one. And it begins with the statement of excesses around World War II. So it's pretty much addressing atrocities. So there's little things and tweaks that were put in, and I think it fits a lot of what we need as people.
How many people have read Manifesto 1 or 2?
I'm going to say most people haven't, because it's not put to people like in school like the Bible was. Like, I went to Christian school for most of my life.
Does the Manifesto 1 or 2 have any parables in it?
No, I don't believe it has parables, but you can create parables. You can create stories and
Sure.
literature and things around that if that's what you want your society to be.
Okay, how many people have read the Bible or been exposed to it?
Far too many people.
Okay. And then how many people have been exposed to the Quran or to the Old Testament?
Also, far too many people.
Okay. And how many people have been exposed to the Bhagavad Gita and all that kind of shit?
Not enough people.
Okay. So, but you see where I'm going, right?
Yeah.
Which is basically like, these are almost global. You're going to have some kind of moral system. And even Hindus are probably vaguely familiar with the more popular stories of the Bible, right? And then not only that, even if they're only vaguely familiar with the Bible, they're still probably going to be able to tell you like the moral lesson from the story, The Good Samaritan, right? And so what I would say is I actually don't see that much disagreement with us, except for I value something more and you don't value it that much.
Yeah.
I would argue is that if you want your thing to be more valued, you're going to have to create intentional parables. And what I mean by that is like, you're going to have to take Manifesto 2. You're going to have to create interesting stories around its moral precepts and guidelines. And you're basically going to need to create a mythology, theology, story series, whatever, that teaches these lessons. And you're going to have to popularize it.
I mean, do you know with great power comes...
Of course.
That's essentially all you need to do. Comic books, movies, whatever the case may be, is the fact that for some reason, this ancient Hebrew sex manual ended up
Yep.
becoming something America holds on to versus the Bhagavad Gita versus the words of Zarathustra versus all the other manuals that existed before. And we decided to perpetuate it in our society. We could do the same for this. And I think comic books probably get you a better moral sense because you see the outcome. So with great power comes great responsibility. Oh shit, I didn't help. I didn't stop this robber. Uncle Ben died. Like we get what
Sure.
you're saying, but we just get it
The
from a different place.
Sure, but here's the danger. Not too big of a danger, but still a danger. Okay. So I think that religion, because the Bible was written over the course of 3,000 years, I guess, or 2,000 years. Like I think I think they say that Exodus probably happened 1200 before Christ, right? And then I think Christianity, obviously, a majority of the books or the things that are taken as canon are in the first few hundred years after Christ. You're talking about 1,500 years of stories, and then Old Testament also stretches into prehistory. And then not just that, but you have the evolution of the church where they selected the books that they wanted to be a part of the Bible, right? And then you also had all the evolutions of Catholicism and Protestantism. So within religion, you have nestled probably 3,000 to like 10,000 years worth of human knowledge. And not just that, it's not purely fictional, right? Ruth was probably a person. Jesus was probably a person. I'm trying to think of who else, but like name like Abraham was probably a person, right? And so their moral precepts are not rooted in like an abstract, disconnected moral system that actually doesn't have correlation with reality. It's rooted in like a reality that was revealed over time through various stories that were based on some semblance of truth. And I think the reason why it resonates is because people find it to be true. So when it comes to with great power comes great responsibility, well, the reason why that resonates is number one, it's a banger fucking line. And number two, people who don't have a lot of power, I think, want to envision themselves as when they have power, they will act as like responsible moral beings, right? And where our world is filled with all sorts of irresponsible, immoral, powerful people, right?
Yeah.
Well, so I think that if you just write, be a good person when you have power. Well, what's a good person? Right? What's power? How do you wield it? How do you wield it responsibly? I can tell you that Aristotle and Plato, Socrates, and Abraham and David and Solomon, they all have things to say about what does it mean to be a good person and a bad person. And they all have things to say about the limits of that. And they all have things to say about what power is. Right. So, you can't just fictionalize it. It has to be based off of the real world. So it's not sufficient to be a cool story, because in your cool story, the good guy, he can get laid, he can get his wife, he can get his kids, he can do cool things, he can be like Jason Bourne or James Bond, and then he can retire in old age. Well, the truth is that in the real world, people who do Jason Bourne and James Bond shit, they die young and stupid. People who do the family shit, they oftentimes don't get to do the James Bond shit, right? So that's what I'm saying is like, if this was like a real project that you cared about the spreading of secular humanism. You can't just tell stories either. You can't just tell Marvel hero stories. You have to tell real stories based off of real lives.
I don't even think that the Bible was real story. I don't think that Moses was a real person. I don't think that David
Why not?
did the things because historically it just doesn't fit. Same thing with David. Like,
no,
yeah,
it does.
Maybe he existed, but I doubt he killed a giant dude that was like 9 feet tall with a rock. I sincerely
So I disagree with you.
Happened.
Okay, I disagree with you, and I disagree with you partially because of an analysis of history. So when it comes to Moses, there was an exodus of Semitic people in around the year 1200. They actually think that the exodus that was written about in the Bible happened under I think it was Tutankhamun. So there's like a record of people. Now, in the book, they say like 50,000 or 100,000 or whatever. In reality, the record was like 2,000, right? But there was still Yeah, there were still Semitic people who left Egypt around that time period and then settled in the world of Canaan. Now, did all the battles happen exactly as it happened? No. Were they in the Sinai Peninsula? I think the Sinai Peninsula you could walk across in like a month. Were they there for like 40 months or 40 years or whatever the fuck? No, obviously not. But at the same time, there's a kernel of truth within the story. And so that's what I'm saying. It's like for you just to say, oh, well, these are all fictionalized accounts that have nothing to do with human experience. What I'm saying is the reason why they resonate with people is because they have something to do with human experience.
Well, we can root them in something we can understand, but I don't think they actually happen as, like, let's say they either didn't happen or they happen slightly different or wildly differently than what is reported.
The Bible is probably hyperbolic.
Yes, absolutely. And so like I'm not here to argue that, oh, there was X amount of people that left Egypt or whatever. These stories are there for a reason. Same thing goes when I was a kid, I had a Bible that I would get read from before I go to bed, which was like a kid's Bible. So when they tell the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, which I don't know why that was in that book, they left out the end part where his daughters sexually assaulted him in a cave.
Sure.
Well,
I know that probably happened.
There's a reason why you excise certain parts out of the Bible, because it leads to shitty morals or shitty ideas. And the reason why they put that part in there was probably to shit on one of the tribes of Israel that they didn't like, that was part of the group. So we can say,
Sure.
oh, well, this part of our tribe is inbred, so we can, say, fuck these people.
Sure.
This is all historical nonsense that we can let go of and not keep in our moral system and keep a more fluid moral system.
I don't think that you can let go of it. So for instance, do you know where the Ten Commandments? Do you know where like there's an anthropological analysis of the Ten Commandments? Do you know where it came from?
I do not.
Okay. So what they suspect is that the behavior of Jews was not codified at the time of the Exodus. So 1200 before Christ, right? They didn't have the Ten Commandments. They didn't have the rules. So what happened at the time, because it was probably a small group of people, is sorry, I got some fucking dickhead in my chat. So what they believed is that the chieftain was adjudicating trials over and over and over again. And so what was happening was people were showing up and they were saying, oh, this guy's worshiping this thing, right? And he's putting this idol before God, or this person lied, or this person killed somebody and they didn't have justification, or this person fucked my wife, right? And so what happened was Moses, as the chieftain of the Jewish people at the time, and we're talking about like tribal history, he was making these rulings over and over and over again. Well, the idea is that he got fucking sick of it. And he was like, fuck this. I'm not going to keep adjudicating all your fucking bullshit. We're going to write down some rules. And if you don't obey these rules, we're going to beat the fuck out of you. And that's where the 10 Commandments came from. Thou shalt not lie. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt honor their parents. Thou shalt not have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not murder. All this stuff came from, basically like the anthropological development of a court. So that's
that way.
Cool.
I think if more people saw it that way, we wouldn't have the issues that we have, and people able to justify their actions on these things, thinking that it comes from something more than it does, which is just people trying to figure shit out. Like I look to a joke from Lenny Bruce where they're just like, hey, we have a society and some dude keeps shitting on the table where we eat. Well, I'm the person in charge and I don't want to throw this person in the shit house, but somebody needs to throw this person in the shit house. So now we're going to create police. So we're going to have these rules because in our society, there's certain things that we want. That's a lot easier to work with and it's a lot more fluid. So I think we're in similar camps on this, where like we're saying we need morals.
Yeah, I value. Yeah, I think that is kind of where it is. Where I just value the religious systems more than you do. And you think we don't need them.
I'm looking at the harms they've caused historically over time and the things that they've justified, and I think the baggage that comes along with them isn't worth the juice for the squeeze.
And my summary of a counter argument would be, I don't think that you can make moral stories sexy or interesting unless you make them parables. And I don't think parables resonate with people unless they seem to reflect reality. And so the advantage of having, I don't know, 5,000, 6,000 years worth of history to analyze is the fact that you can take the stories that resonate, because they probably resonate for a fucking reason. So if you want to write a secular humanist Bible where you take all of the morality that is inside Manifesto 2, you want to narrativize it, and then you want to couch it in like stories that seem to resonate with human beings, then I think that's the fastest way that you could grow secular humanism. Otherwise, people are probably going to defer to cultural Christianity or cultural Judaism or cultural whatever.
I can completely understand that. And yeah, I think that's a good place to end this chat.
Okay, cool. Well, I'm going to go chat with Chad and maybe do a review or something. But did you have anything else that you wanted to hit before we kind of get out of here?
I was just happy we didn't end up talking about the current drama at play, because I'm not into drama and I don't have any stake in this. So thank you for giving me your time.
Cool. All right. Well, looking forward to the next one. So I hope you have a beautiful day, Lethe. I'm going to go hang out with Chad and probably go watch some rape, sexual assault drama.
You as well. Enjoy yourself, Connor.
Bye, buddy.
All right, y'all. Hold up. I'm going to hop into my open. Well, semi-open. In case anybody wanted to chat after that. Changing the scene. Oh, it's always difficult to get this to capture the right Discord. Okay, as the motorcycles pass by, grabbing whoever wants to come through. So if anybody wants to come in and have a chat, I am in my Discord right now. Yeah, whatever Gibbs has been talking about, Gibbs has been popping off. It was causing me to crack in the conversation and lose track. I was having fun. It was so bad he actually noticed that I was laughing about that. Okay, so still driving for 20 minutes. So does anybody think I missed anything in that chat, or I was, off base in what I was saying? To sit there and say that an ancient manual that's supposedly handed down by a god, it's just pretty much them saying, hey, we want to take this manual, but we want to be able to ignore the parts that we don't like, but still keep this other fucked up shit because it works for us for the time being, without having to own up to any of the bullshit. Because that's kind of what I expected, like, for him to say that he would rather keep that for that reason, I find to be interesting. Yeah, if you want to get in, just hop in any room and I can pull you into this room and you'll be good. All right, we got Universal Discourse. How's it going, UD?
Hey, how are you?
So far, so good. I woke up early for this one, so I'm still not entirely awake, but I think I'm doing okay.
Your Discord is hard to get in.
A little bit. It's weird. It's all based on the rivers of hell in Dante's Inferno.
Right. And then you have to get set up. Okay, so I'm in there already. I woke up early, tried to catch this. That was great. What did you think? What did you think?
I mean, I think it was good.
Style, look at that. Yeah?
It's just like he wasn't really giving me a good reason why we need to hold on to this beyond, hey, you guys just don't have cool stories to give us morals. When I bring up comic books as being just as good and ingrained in our heads through Americana, it's like, well, you don't have enough comic books. Is basically, you don't have 2,000 years of comic books.
You don't have a graphic novel that's 3,000 years old. I just wanted to. I'm one of those idiot fact checkers. The Exodus document is not an Exodus document.
Yeah, there's no proof.
That's the first written reference to Israel in the Egyptian corpus
Yeah, I
by a
believe that.
pharaoh who ruled for 10 years. It was simply mentioned as that these tribes of Canaan were laid waste. They were destroyed. And that the complete genocide of the band of Israelites was essentially what he was saying. That was not an exodus. It's pretty simple. That no one survived.
Well, if
So
you look at
that is not exodus. And I just wanted to make sure.
definitely not. I
Okay.
wasn't trying to push on that part too much. Like I wanted to kind of
No.
stick to what was going on because like I could literally
Yeah.
have an argument about different stories
Everything.
of the Bible, who actually existed, who didn't exist, what's allegory, what's not allegory, which is part of why I get into it with religion to begin with. But there's no historical proof that there was a mass migration of Canaanite people, considering these people were still in Canaan at the time the story would have happened, because they're Canaanites.
They were
They
in
just don't want to
Canaan.
admit that they're Canaanites. So
They were all in Canaan with several other tribes. So, which is when they call the tribes of Canaan or children of Canaan sometimes. But I don't know. I just wanted to make sure because there are some people listening and whatnot
yeah,
that,
that don't
that
know
are
this
very
particular
curious
thing.
about what do you mean in 1200 BC, and I'm like, well, that's actually not an account. Just for everyone's edification, there was not actually any account whatsoever of an exodus or evidence of an exodus. It's a whole different story. But what he was saying there was that that the account of it was shifted as suited because that was what he was on.
And
Was
that's
that
where I was at. Like, if you're gonna
and
shift
we
things
agreed
as
with each
suited,
other. He's great at making the concession when you guys are like, "Oh no, you're with me. You're on the same page."
which makes it impossible for me to attack from the angle I'm attacking from, whereas like
That's
we're
right.
still dealing with baggage now.
That's right.
He
It's
seems
very
to be fine
difficult.
with the baggage. I don't like baggage.
Yeah, I like that you were getting into the distinction.
Mhm.
That you were really trying to differentiate the two.
Trying.
All right. Hey, no, there are no guarantees, but you were really on it, and all the way through. And he looked like he was just playing ball with you. Like, okay, let's go there. Let's try to do that. And that you were really trying to define the difference.
Yeah. So like
And that gives
we
that
currently
gives you,
have Mormonism in America, as someone brings up in my chat, and that's basically American Christianity, and it did what it wanted to do. And
it did what it wanted to do.
they're a stronghold in America and Utah at this point.
Well,
That's
yeah, they
not
have
what you
their
want.
own. They have their own interpretation and their own cosmology, actually. Right?
Exactly. And black people don't really do well in that religion. And even if they make it to heaven, they're going to be servants for all eternity. And people prescribe and ascribe to this particular belief system.
Yeah. That's interesting because I don't know. Excuse me, sorry. If that really brought up. Oh, we're all dealing with this head cold. Oh, I don't know if that just really brought up in the beginning, and and all the different sects. But I think you would have just so gone down a rabbit hole with that. You'd been there forever.
Yeah, I didn't think you'd be willing
So,
to like go that far into like what religion is. All the underlying concepts that are being put forward, and that's why I kind of touched on it, like when I touched on the idea of the Sodom and Gomorrah story, which depending on who you talk to about it, it's about hating gay people and the fact that there was gay people in that, and then if you hit somebody else, they're going to say, oh, it was just that they were so depraved that they were willing to rape deities or angels, and
sleep
that's
with
why
angels.
they had to go. And you're going to get different rationales for why supposedly the city that never existed got wiped out, and then skip the end portion where they wanted to shit on a tribe for being inbred.
and then it lended its name to a sexual practice for the next 3,000 years, sodomy. Like, it's so infamous that they named it. They named like anal sex for a city that was supposedly turned into salt 3,000 years ago. I'm like, whoa, damn, unbelievable. You know? Yeah, it's true. Think about it. Sodomy. It does not exist. It's not a Latin root word. It's named exactly for that city in the Bible. It's their only way. It was their euphemistic way, right? Their hush hush taboo way of pointing to that. Did that. What is that? That's sodomy. That's things sodomites do. Okay. But that included incest and bestiality as well.
I'm saying, like, I think these are things we can, like, we're still having conversations about these things. Like, when I'm in Wig Server, they literally have, like, talks about whether or not it's morally okay to fuck a dog. Like, I don't think this is something we really have an issue with societally. I'm sure there are some outliers, and we're basically just dealing with the outliers.
Oh, you can do it, but no one's inviting you to dinner. That's all.
True. Like, I don't think we're gonna look.
I don't want you at my table. Right.
Yeah, we're not gonna look fondly at the person that we know fucks dogs.
No.
So
I like get the dog consent. Right. Now, was it good for the dog? Is the dog smoking a cigarette afterward and going, babe, you know, we got a good thing going here? You know, I love you. You know, I mean, I don't know. I don't think so.
Yeah, like consent, all of these things are things that we can get from secular humanism that are going to be functional and usable. And we're not going to have to appeal to a god and say, hey, you know, is there a way we can change this rule? Because this doesn't seem to work. These things are set in stone for a reason. Like, literally, they wrote the 10 Commandments in stone, according to the story, for a reason.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. So, in the context of sex addiction, I mean, usually the don't spill the seed thing, that one's pretty much going to nip that shit in the bud. Okay? It's going to be real hard to have a sexual addiction when you cannot ejaculate, except for one purpose. You're going to have a lot of wives, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Did you know how many wives traditionally a man was supposed to be able to support?
I truly don't know, but I know a lot of people biblically had upwards of 3.
7.
7, okay.
Because if he was going to be a tent leader, same as in Cree Lifeways, if he was going to be the head man, he had to prove he could have that many and sustain that many households. And 7 being one of the key numbers. So this is his ambition. I want my car, my trad wife, and my, you know, ga. That was his measure. That was the measure of a man. Similarly, to have 7 virgins for Allah. Same thing. Came from the same culture. And at once it was a shared belief. That was the measure of a man. Only the Semitic people had to have 7 wives in real life. And for Arab or Muslim, it was promised after you died.
I mean, it's great to
Which
promise
is kind of
things after
hard.
people die, because then you never have to deliver.
But speaking of your main contention, that is some hella faith, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And that's why I was kind of getting at in the very beginning, if you're a true believer in this, I really can't argue with you. I think it's stupid and you're goofy and have poor critical thinking skills, but at least I can understand why you're leaning on these books and these ideas. If you're just culturally this and you don't believe in it, it seems like dog water. What's the point?
Right. And if you look at it from the point of cultural relativism, anthropology, right, then you understand the roots, you know, of how people organize themselves, their epistemologies, their subsistence strategies, you know, and that they're all, you know, formulated from they evolve and adapt their adaptive strategies to particular environments. Don't ever forget that. That's true. You see evolution in all institutions. You're actually looking at a kind of social evolution. And evolution in the proper sense. Genetic. Who is the change box? If you have 7 wives, baby, you're pumping out a lot of babies. You're changing the genotype.
Which is another big portion of religion is
husbandry.
There we go.
And because these religions are pastoral, unlike Bhagavad Gita, which is a philosophy, right?
Yeah, when he asked about the Bhagavad Gita and how many people read it, I was like, not enough. Compared to the Abrahamics, way too many.
Okay, Buddhism, for instance, that's a philosophy, not meant to be a religion. Never was. later adopted it and as a religion way far east. But interesting, right? But there you are, you know. So I think that I'm always listening for because I really like you and what you do, and I'm always listening for
Appreciate it.
the root of that, you know. Where is this grounded in observable phenomena? Okay, well, you're looking at actual evolution and social evolution, genetic evolution and social evolution in these institutions. And now, if you look at religion in these contexts and you understand that's a hell of faith and a way of life. And when you say cultural Christianity, my comment the other night, because immediately everybody just scoffed and coughed and pit. And I'm like, just a minute, cultural Christianity is different from whatever you would call secular Christianity, whatever that other thing was, because I said, no, cultural Christianity is based on a way of life. It's not an idea. And if you wanna talk about it, for, against, with, against, you need to understand that.
True.
That's a way of life. Imagine if terrorism itself were a way of life, which it became for ISIS. All of these people were fundamentalists and tribal people. They were orthodox adherents. Sharia law, one of the most brutal. And it came from the pastoral, break the leg of the lamb. Get rid of the girls, save the boys, get rid of the girls. The girls are optionals. They can't speak. They can't be looked at. They're just a commodity. I mean, it's an incel's wet dream, right? Here's my trad wife. She can't even speak unless I give her permission. In fact, she has no mouth. And it's all missionary. Like, that entire thing you were talking about, that is also, it's Sharia law. And clearly, that's neither Semitic nor Christian. But it is pastoral. So there's a whole other reality to some of these beliefs. And why do they matter? Counting head of household came from this culture. The idea of it. Pharaoh, the idea of it. Big house came from this culture.
There we go.
And he can't. He. The only thing about Connor that I'm like, oh, I wish he would have that context, because he never does. It's just not his wheelhouse. So I'm over here blah blahing and bothering your chat because I'm like, I want to add some facts in for you, in all due respect to everybody's beliefs, because I think that if that's your way of life and your way of staying alive, all right, let it harm none, then it needs to be respected. But if it starts harming people, we got a problem.
There we go.
Well, universal discourse. Yeah, universal discourse. The reason why he's leaving things out is because he's a total fucking fraud and a snake oil. And not only that, I'm sorry, I'm gonna just take over for a second now. Universal discourse, if you don't mind. I'm actually on a timetable. And Lethy, thanks for having me real quick. I just want to respond since I was called a liar. I have shared a video of one of my salespeople. Now, but before we watch this video, she wants me to tell y'all that she please don't judge her for her appearance, because she is on. She is like, it is the weekend, and she is in Los Angeles right now helping her family move stuff out from the fires, although she is employed here in Texas. So she took time out of her day to respond in my favor. So I'm going to go ahead. I already sent Lethy the video.
Yeah, I'll put it up in the Discord. If you don't mind, Universal Discourse, we were apparently airing out some grievances.
Yeah, I was here for that. I understand.
I kind of knew this was going to happen, because I didn't want to deal with the drama of the whole Destiny thing, because I don't know Destiny. I don't care about Destiny. I don't watch Destiny. But
right.
Gibbs and Connor also have some background, so I'm going to go ahead and share the screen on this.
And then I'm going to make a statement after this. So, yeah, go ahead and share it.
All right, playing it.
This is the best of Twitch right here. Watch this.
Saying.
I can confirm
Just watch this.
Several calls to our office this week regarding things Gibbs said about someone named Counterpoints. I can also confirm that these callers... I can confirm that there were several calls to our office this week.
Oh, she looks fine. She's pretty.
About someone named Counterpoints. I can also confirm that these callers tried to
no audio.
About personal information regarding Gibbs.
No audio?
No.
Oh, that's weird.
I had audio on my side.
Okay, yeah.
I did not. Okay. Oops. So sorry. It's just me. I don't know why. Oh, never mind. Because I'm stupid. There's no other reason.
Yeah. You can play it one more time if you want.
I'll play it one more time just for
Sorry.
edification. No, you're good. You're good. All right, playing it again.
I can confirm that there were several calls to our office this week regarding things Gibbs said about someone named Counterpoints. I can also confirm that these callers tried to inquire about personal information regarding Gibbs.
So what? That's all that she wants to say. Now, I really want to say something right here. One, she is one of my salespeople. She's fantastic. What's really good about her, y'all mentioned the face tats, I'll tell you, is she is really good with makeup, so she looks like a different person depending on the situation. If she's like going to emo bar or something, she'll have the face tats. If she's going to go to like a professional setting, it's all gone. It's pretty impressive. Now, here's the thing. So like I said, this is one of the salespeople. She's coming in here, took time out of her day while she's in Los Angeles, taking a break and saying stuff about this shit. Secondly, if that wasn't true, hypothetically, his other statement was, what else is Gibbs lie about the girls? Now, I feel like I posted stuff about this. If this was not a salesperson, that means that somehow my fat ass has so much riz that I got this woman who's attractive to just lie for me and then just tell all this. So either way, it proves that he's a fucking liar, and I'm not. So, you know what? Suck a dick, Counterpoints. I fucking tell the truth. You're a fake fraud, and that's really all I got to say about that, because what the proof is in the pudding. You know, people wouldn't be willing to give statements in a professional setting if it wasn't true. And it is true, because he's a piece of shit, and he sick people on me. Too bad I don't live a life of lies. Everything about me on the internet is true. And here's the best part. I'm actually more toned down on the internet than I am in person. So, it's crazy. So here's the thing, Counterpoints. Balls in your court. Liar, liar, pants on fire. Piece of shit.
I knew you guys would not.
There's been an ongoing thing, and I'm having a conversation with Gibbs this week as I am continuing my interview series. Gibbs will be the interviewee to this coming week, and we can get into some of these things and any of the allegations. I think there's a lot to bear out, especially in the current climate, and I think Gibbs is one of the people we definitely need to hear from.
Yeah, I'm excited. It's going to be good. Student Wednesday. It's going to be really fun stuff. I'm excited to be there. But now, I'm going to go hang out with some of these non-existent women, and we're going to go fucking watch the Royal Rumble. So y'all have a good rest of y'all's night. Thanks for bringing me on for 2 minutes here.
Yeah, thanks for coming through.
Hi, Mr. Gibbs.
Peace.
Oh, I knew that would happen.
Oh, I knew it would happen too. I was just waiting for it.
I know, because Connor will just like, oh, by the way, you're a roaring piece of shit, and you're irrelevant, and stop talking to me. Bye. Boom.
Well, I didn't tell Gibbs that I was having the conversation with Counterpoints because, like, it could have like turned into, hey, I need to crash this panel. And it's like, nah, I'm just trying to have a quick conversation about cultural Christianity and not bring any of the Twitch drama into it. And it still happened.
No, but he had to just be here, right? He just had to be there, and he just had to say something, right?
Hey, that is the nature of Twitch. That is the nature of these spaces. We have nemesis and people we have beefs with, and it will bear out no matter what you do.
Yeah, that's water and oil right there. Definitely water and oil. Yeah,
it's not your fault I laugh. How can I not laugh? It's like most of the chat going off about it. It was like just roasting the situation.
Your chat was quite. I loved it. I loved your. I don't get to see. Sorry for like I'm just inviting myself in. I don't get to see your chat too much, and they were just like they had like around the clock, kind of. Like they was playing 21, right, on the court, right? Yeah. Their responses to things, and one of them was talking about stomping the runway and roadkill. I was like, no, you didn't say that shit. I don't believe you said that shit.
Yeah, if you've been around me long enough, my poker face is garbage. So, like, if I read chat, and I usually respond to chat as I'm going on,
I prayed for you.
People know what I'm thinking or what's on my mind, because it's pretty clear on my face.
Yeah, it's pretty well. It's pretty well, obvious, and that's fine, But I just want to know which one of them do you think snatched the trophy?
I mean, Gibbs was popping off ridiculous. So, usually Testy is one of the prime people that cause
Instigators.
a reaction. Parallax will make me crack pretty often. Jerome was.
Look, Jerome in Seattle. Which one? Kai snatched the trophy. Kai mowed that mother truck and gas. Yeah. Yeah, that's some like pageant language that I'm like, oh really? That's stomping, huh?
And then
Did he
usually I have
pee all over it?
opens.
Jerome, did he pee all over it? Did Kai pee all over it?
But I think I got what I was trying to get across pretty well in that conversation.
Yeah.
And we got X-Twister. What's good, my dude?
Yeah. Yeah. I enjoyed that.
I'm glad you did.
Here
I
we go.
usually only do Wednesdays because my time is pretty limited,
Tight.
but I decided to make some time, and luckily my
Ooh.
kid is at a birthday party, so that gives me a little more time. So I'll go see him after this, but I'll be hanging out until that happens.
Yeah. Yeah, I gotta go do some stuff, go to work. So I woke my ass up early. In fact, I went without sleep. We sat on that stream till I believe it was 7 in the morning.
I could have stayed there all night, honestly. I had to tell myself,
Whoa.
hey, you need to go to bed because you're trying to have a conversation tomorrow and you need to be clear.
Nope, we sat up. Kurt sat up. We're like, we're just gonna sacrifice the comfort zone. No shit, we're just gonna set up because that was a classic. For me, that was my classic stream. And then we heard about this, and I was like, ooh, we're all gonna be here. I don't know where freaking Ice Belt is, but the rest of us are definitely over here. Probably we're like, yeah, let's go. This was awesome. I enjoyed
Thanks for
it.
coming through. Your
Yeah, I
community's fun
told
to
you.
hang out in, so like, usually whenever I have some time, I just pop right in there.
Yeah, you should just come over every time we're live and just go hello. Drop the word, and yeah, you're welcome anytime. But we Golden Roadkill. Change box. Yes, it's appropriate when a warrior, right, makes a roadkill that he has to mark his territory. Didn't you know that? That's tradition.
So I hadn't talked to Counterpoints since it was before the election, and there was like a big rift going on in the conservative/Republican community on what they wanted to be called. Some didn't want to be called Republicans, some didn't want to be called conservatives.
Right.
And it was over like who's Trumpy, who's not Trumpy. The whole deal was Tiberius D, Counterpoints, Gibbs, Rob Noor, Jeb Tan. Who else was in that one? There's a couple.
Those are like hardcore.
People. Yeah, it's one of the main things in my YouTube page right now, and I called it the Battle for Battle for the Republic, and they've had this beef going on since then.
That's a good idea, and that's perfect, and that's interesting.
Yeah, because like
that's what
I don't subscribe to any of those ideas, but I'm willing to let them come in here and hammer that out.
Exactly. Trumpy was the 8th dwarf in Snow White. Oh, was he like the 5th beetle? Yeah.
The one no one likes. Nightmare blood rotation. True.
So that's a really good idea. When I saw your thing on Wednesday, that inspired me to do what I did on Friday. Had to be done.
Yeah, I was supposed to have a conversation with Modi, but he didn't. I guess he's on Brit Bonger time and he didn't realize it was 5:30. I sent him a message and he didn't get back to me. So it was like an hour and a half later. He's like, hey, can we still have the talk? I'm like, I'm already in open panel. We're just shooting the shit at this point. And there was a bunch of veterans in talking about how veterans transition into society afterwards and how they're treated in America, which also turned into a bunch of other stuff along the way. So
I wish I'd been in on that one. That's perfect.
My opens tend to go where they want.
Yeah, and Alisoga popped in. I was like, yeah, bro. Yeah, brother. That's my Samoan brother.
Yeah, Alex would have been epic in that because he does not mince words. He's very
He don't pull no punch. He doesn't pull no punch. He doesn't have to.
But the sense of humor is there, so you're getting like the bluntness and the comedy going in with it. It can be a little visceral to experience, but it's definitely good stuff.
Yeah, I like him because he was in my D&D campaign, but yeah, we really related to each other on like the indigenous and the veteran points. We've been both walked off of several panels that just you know, weren't going, I guess you want to say, the way that it should have. So we bailed on a lot of things together, you know, because it was disrespectful, right? So,
I get you.
yeah.
Well, on that, I should probably go ahead and raid out. I'll probably stick around in my Discord for a while and chill. Oh, Sunsoul is doing his thing. So let's raid into Sunsoul. I haven't done that before.
Oh, I think I'm banned in Console, so
Really?
I'll see. Probably.
Well, let's find out.
Let's find out. I don't care, but let's find out.
Thank you all for hanging out today. It's been a blast. Hopefully I can do more streams and just get some more opens going. And I always appreciate chat. Chat is always the winner. So check y'all out next time.
Okay. Bye.
That was fun.